Welcome to Beyond Transcendence with Andrew. I'm your host, Andrew Wilson. On today's show, I have Jim Marshall. Jim Marshall is a polymathic intellectual who has devoted over 50,000 hours to the study and practice of multiple dimensions of human potential and development. He has received a classical education as an honor student at a Jesuit military prep school, was accepted into engineering school while still a junior in a prep school, and attended college on an academic scholarship. He graduated college with a Bachelor of Science cum laude. While still an undergraduate, he began the study of alternative arts and sciences, which today would be described as transformational and holistic. Eventually, he became a professional practitioner, and after 28 years of formal education, had a long career as a human development engineer. Jim has integrated the best aspects of the most advanced techniques on the planet and expanded their limits by his own research and discovery. He has successfully treated and/or trained hundreds of clients over a 40-year career and is the inventor of Septemics and several consciousness expanding systems. His areas of expertise include psychology, theology, parapsychology, science, engineering, mathematics, law, literature, history, music, organization, metaphysics, military science, political science, physical culture, and education. And now please welcome Jim Marshall. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Andrew.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I just want to clarify, so as not to confuse your viewers, the word is polymathic.
Polymathic, okay.
Polymathic intellectual.
So what can my audience learn from Septemics?
Well, first I should say, to give all this some context, I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created the revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. There are 35 such scales, each of which is unique, and together they span the spectrum of human experience, by which I mean any problem, dilemma, difficulty, situation that any person has that has anything to do with people can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one.
So what is the benefits of Septemics for people?
Okay, well, later I'll talk about some of the specifics, but in general, I wrote this book to help people. I've had a lifetime of helping people. Each of these 35 scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the beneficialness or salutariness of any group, individual, or activity. If the group, individual, or activity moves persons up the scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. So I'm giving you a yardstick by which to measure human affairs, which is an entirely new concept. More importantly, just finding out what level you or another person is at on any scale is by itself inherently beneficial and enlightening. Every time you correctly spot either yourself or another on any scale, you have what you might call an epiphany or a realization. You have an insight. So you say, let's say you analyze your mother and you find her at level 5. Now I see what's going on with my mother. You see, you have a realization. That's one of the ways you know you found the right level, that you have a realization. So it gives you an insight. So every time you do this, you use one of these scales, you have an insight. So this is what you might call a virtuous cycle, where the more you use it, the more insight you have. And the more insight you have, the easier it is for you to use. And the more you use it, the more insight you have. So your general understanding just continues to go up indefinitely as long as you use this.
So, what made you come to this realization of septemics?
Well, the story really starts at age 16 when I was accepted into engineering school. Now, of course, I thought at the time that I was going to be engineering physical things such as airfoils or motors or electrons or whatever. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche because it is the area of greatest unknown and mystery. And more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems that people have in industrialized society are because they don't understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the son, don't understand the boss, don't understand somebody who's running for office. That's why we routinely elect criminals and idiots to our governments, because we don't understand them. And this book solves that issue across 35 axes. So, to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer, using engineering techniques and principles to assist my clients to improve their lives. Now, of course, all of my clients improved, but incidentally, I started to notice that I could predict the outcome of the session. I never told this to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, I came to realize that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed and written down. Needless to say, this only made me better at what I did because I knew where the client was going. Now, I have to realize the clients didn't know anything about this. Every time the client would move from the level that I had observed he was at to the next level up on the scale, it verified my hypothesis. So this happened thousands and thousands of times. And so I would write this down. Now, by 1995, I had about 32 scales that I had simply observed in the sessions. One in particular was a 6-level scale that I had been using for decades and I knew was correct. And one day I was pondering a difficult client, and I realized that that client was at a level on that scale that I had not previously observed. Now, when I saw this 7th level, it was obvious to me where to insert it. So when I inserted that 7th level into the 6th level scale, that scale then manifested mathematically. Now, I should explain a little bit for those of you who are allergic to math. I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. It's a very real thing to me. It's not just something that you do with a pencil on a piece of paper. I see it in the world. And really all competent scientists and engineers have that type of appreciation of mathematics, as well as the mathematicians. So what happened was, when I inserted that 7th level, all of these data jumped out at me. Now you might say, well, what's that got to do with math? Well, the whole point of math is that you start with an equation or a formula and you coax data out of it. That's how Einstein found E equals mc squared. Everybody in the math and science community knows exactly what steps he took mathematically to come to that conclusion. So when you have data jump out at you, that is a mathematical phenomenon. So suddenly I had this scale that had 7 levels, and it went from being, at that moment, it went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data. And I said, whoa, I found something here, because all of these aspects interlocked with one another like a Chinese puzzle. So this was inherently mathematical. I said, whatever this is, it's natural law because it's got mathematics embedded in it. So then I thought, I wonder how many of these other scales are also 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way, because you have to realize I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So knowing what I was looking for, I inspected all these other scales, and in a short period of time, each of them went to 7 levels. And as it did, it manifested mathematically. So now I had 32 7-level scales that all have mathematics embedded in them. And these scales were all discovered by direct empirical observation. There is no theory of septemics. I just saw what was there and wrote it down. So then I said, this looks to me like a new subject because having gone to school for 28 years, I never saw anything like this anywhere. So then I thought, well, I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as human development engineer, to helping them by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out so people can use it. So I'm going to have to write a book. Wasn't on my agenda to do this. So the first draft of the book was completed in December of 95, and I sent it in a transcript form to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively. And I have to tell you, it's been 28 and a half years now since that initial release. Nobody who has ever looked at this material has ever said anything like, I don't get it, this doesn't make any sense, or anything like that. What they typically say is something like, wow, yeah, this makes sense. And you don't have to be a college graduate to understand this, because I went out of my way to write the book in a way that anybody who could read English reasonably well would understand. And you have to understand, I started school at the age of 3, and I have been engaged in education my entire life to this day. So I have a very clear idea about how to get things across to someone from all of this lifetime of experience on both sides of education. So at that point, after my colleagues had responded to it, I spent the next 25 years working on this book. Now, the reason for that is, first of all, I had to discover the septemic phenomena, and I pretty much told you already how that was done, although I did find 3 more scales as I was writing them. Then I had to take this data and use it to craft a workable philosophic system. I have to understand I am a dyed-in-the-wool engineer. There's such a thing as an engineering personality. And when I went to engineering school, there were 2,000 of us in that school, all guys, and we were all very much the same. Very practical people. Not interested in opinions or beliefs. Interested in facts and results. That's how engineers are. If you're not like that, you can't be an engineer. Because let me explain something. To a scientist, the final product is a theory. The theory of evolution, the theory of relativity, right? Those are 2 of the great scientists that we know of, right? But to an engineer, the product is a thing that works, like a cell phone, car, an airplane, a bridge, a refrigerator, an air conditioner. It's a thing. So we're only interested in facts and results. So I had to craft something that would work all the time for everyone. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have released it. So that took 20 years, going from the septemic scales, which I had in 95, to a workable philosophic system. Because simply having the scales themselves is not enough. You have to explain it and develop it and make this useful to people so that people look at it the same. Yeah, this explains why I'm not getting along with my girlfriend. That's what this is about. So the most time-consuming part of this was expressing this in a way that would make sense to the average reader. Because understanding something is different from getting somebody else to understand. So that was a lot of work. Because you have to realize there's 35 scales. Each of the scales has 7 levels. There's 245 different levels. So each level had to be ascertained, verified, and then expressed in a way that would make sense to the average reader. And I know I succeeded at that because I've been watching people get this for 28 and a half years. This is not obscure. People get this. So people read this book, who have never been to college, and they say, yeah, I see it. It's just This is right. This makes sense to me. And the reason they respond that way is it's natural law. So it's similar to the way people respond to other forms of natural law, such as the Pythagorean theorem. So like when you're 12 or 13, you first see the Pythagorean theorem in math class, you know, you just look at it and say, huh, yeah, this makes sense. And you've got it. It becomes like a part of your mind. So as I went into advanced math, that was always there. And as soon as I would see a right triangle, bingo, I would know exactly, bring the Pythagorean theorem in and use it to solve that part of the problem. I didn't have to think about it, you see? So another way of explaining this is several people have said to me, what book is your book like? And I have to tell them in all candor, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before. But each of these 35 scales is expressed in what you might call a table or a spreadsheet that is comparable to the periodic table of elements. So the periodic table, before it was invented, there was chemistry, but Mendeleev, by creating the periodic table, revolutionized it. He made it easier to teach, easier to learn, easier to understand. Because you look at it and say, oh, yeah, hydrogen is here. Yeah, and then number 2 is helium. Yeah, and then there's lithium over here. Then you just go, it makes perfect sense, vertically and horizontally, if you study chemistry. So each of these 35 scales is the periodic table for the corresponding subject. And if I may, I'd like to tell you the names of those 35 scales so that you know exactly what subject matter is in the book. May I do that?
Yes, you may.
Okay. So I'm just going to read this to you.
Okay.
There are 24 individual scales, meaning they apply primarily to an individual, and 11 group scales, meaning they apply primarily to a group. These are the individual scales. The scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales. The scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself could dramatically improve the life of the reader. And I'll give you an example. I mentioned the scale of motivation. What's more important than knowing someone's motivation? I mean, that is key in understanding the person. When you know somebody's motivation, that's an important insight. You know why that person is there, why they're doing what they're doing. That's how the police solve crimes. They look for a motive. So they say, well, okay, this guy, his brother, he's got no motive to kill this guy. They ignore him. But wait a minute, there's an insurance policy for $500,000 and the wife is a beneficiary. So she becomes a suspect. See? Motive. Now, she may not have done it, but they're going to look into it. See? So they're going to say, do you have an alibi? Well, yes, I was at the women's club and 200 people saw me. Okay, that's that. But that's how they do it. So you could take this scale and you could say, what is my wife's motivation toward it? What is my son's motivation toward it? What is my boss's motivation toward it? What is my next door neighbor's motivation toward it? And you could just keep doing this 300, 400, 500 different times for all these different people. Not only the people who are currently in your life, you can even use this on the people previously in your life. Like you had a girlfriend, right? 10 years ago. What was Gertrude's motivation toward me? Now I see what's going on, see? And then you could reverse the vector and do the opposite. You could say, what is my motivation toward my pastor? What is my motivation toward my girlfriend? What is my motivation toward my employee? And you could use it that way another 300 or 400 or 500 times. Now, by the time you finish this exercise, you know your motivation toward everybody and everybody's motivation toward you that's ever been in your life. You are a greatly clarified person. You know what's going on to a great extent that you did not know before, because one of the problems that people have is they don't know motivation. So I'll give you an example how to use this in a practical way. Let's say you have a couple and they've been dating for a few years and they're talking about getting married. So wouldn't it be a reasonable question for both of them to ask, why does this person want to marry me? I mean, isn't it a sensible question? I'm not saying to ask the other party. I'm saying get the book, look at the scale. Because you see, because there are only 7 choices, it's not hard to do. You're selecting from a menu of 7. It's not like you go into a restaurant that has 200 things, like you go into Denny's, there's like 200 things on their menu. It takes you an hour and a half to read the whole thing. So it's only 7. The guy does this, and maybe after he looks at this, he says, "Oh, I can see she wants to marry me because she loves me." That's level 1 on the scale of motivation, the highest motivation of all. But maybe that's not what happens. Maybe he says, now that I thought about this for a while, I can see that she wants to marry me because I drive a Lamborghini, I fly my own Learjet, I have a 60-foot yacht, I live in a $15 million condo, and I have $10 million in the bank. That's a different motivation. That's level 4 money. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that's what it is. Now, what the guy does with that, that's up to him. He might look at it and say, well, okay, she wants to marry me for my money, but I really love this girl, so I'm going to. That could happen. Or he might say, you know what? She's a gold digger. I don't want to marry a gold digger. I want to marry somebody who loves me for myself. And he dumps her. Now, you might think in that second case he's going to be upset, and you would be wrong. Because when you correctly find the level, you have an insight. That is a positive experience. Now I understand why she did this and why she did this and why she did this and why she said that. See, that's a positive experience. So he's not going to be upset. He's going to say, Andrew, thank you for showing me this. You helped me to dodge a bullet and get out of this before I wound up owing this woman $20,000 a month in alimony. So now he can go on and find somebody who wants to marry him because she loves him, not because he has all this money. So whether you find out yourself or another person at a high level or a low level, it's always a positive experience because it's the truth. So that's sort of how this works.
So basically, it's like a book for problem solving, or like any life task that is thrown your way. There is a method to that task that you have to do. And you've created a system that helps anyone and everyone find their way through that task. Is that correct?
Yes, but let me qualify anyone and everyone. This book is for anyone who can read English reasonably well and wants to improve himself or others. Now, first of all, I estimate there are about 1.5 billion English speakers on it. And I estimate that about 1 billion of them could read this book. Okay, so that's the public for it. The other 7 billion people are out of luck. They have to translate it some. Good luck on that. Now, the next thing is, some people think that everyone wants to improve himself or others. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. There are all kinds of categories of people who have no interest in improving themselves or others. This would include psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, professional criminals, corrupt politicians, war criminals, serial murderers, insane people. There's all kinds of people who don't have that motivation. Now, I've actually calculated that about half of the human race wants to improve oneself and or others. Now, you might say, well, what about a guy who he's got 180 IQ, he's got $5 million in the bank, he's got a supermodel for a wife, and he's got 3 beautiful children. does he really need this book? And the answer is yes. I'll tell you why. Because at some point, he's going to have an employee who has a drinking problem, or he's going to have a wife who's disaffected, or he's going to have a daughter who's getting into drugs, or he's going to have a son who's having trouble in school. All of those things can be addressed by this. So it's very useful. That is why I released it. This actually helps people. And the beauty of it is I wrote this book in such a way that once you have the book, you don't need anything else in order to use it. You don't need to hire a facilitator. You don't need to take classes. You don't need to join a religion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just you and the book. The only thing you might need is a dictionary. But I would say that for every book on earth. I would never teach anybody anything without having a dictionary handy. Because the biggest problem people have is that they don't know what the words mean. And they don't know that they don't know what the words mean. So I never say to a student, do you know what this means? Because he's going to say yes. I say, what is the definition of the word electron? And if I don't get a correct answer in 1 second, I say, let's look it up. Right, so we look it up and we go through all. Okay, now I see that's what's clear. And see, and then we go back to the material. So a dictionary is always a good thing. I actually carried around with me, obviously before the internet, a unabridged dictionary for 15 years while I was a student. And something would come up. I could be on a bus, on a train, my girlfriend's house. I'm not sure what this means. Look it up. And that, it really helped me become a polymathic scholar. Because when you have a precise definition, you know what you're talking about. You may have noticed very often people will use 100 words where they could have said it. Did you ever notice that? If you listen to somebody who's really smart like Elon Musk, he uses words sparingly. He thinks about it. And he gives you a concise answer. See, because he's really smart and he's educated. Or somebody like Jordan Peterson would do the same thing. But a lot of people who are not like that, they go blah, 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 blah. They don't know So this subject consists of nothing but words. So you better know what they mean. But if you read the book, you'll see I undercut that problem greatly because there is a glossary, not only in front of every chapter, but even in front of the introduction. Also, the names of the 35 scales, I give synonyms, and the names of each of the 7 levels of every scale, I give synonyms. So that gives you a depth of understanding. So I went out of my way to make it easy for people to grasp it. Like somebody could look at something and say, wonder what it means by that. Well, there's a synonym right there. And he says, okay, now I get it. So this is a really helpful thing. Each of these scales is like a lens that you hold up either to the mirror to look at yourself or to another person to look at that person. So it makes it clear. So let me give you an analogy to tell you how this works, how simple this is. Let's say you invited me to your house to look at your garden. You say, Jim, I have this nice garden. You want to see it? Yeah, I would be there because I love gardens. So I come to your house. I don't even know if you have a garden, but if you do, I would come there and I would say, Andrew has peonies, chrysanthemums, hydrangeas, tulips, roses, violets, forget-me-nots, irises. Now, the reason that I can say all of that is I know a lot about gardening and flowers, so I can analyze it. And I could actually assist you if you wanted by telling you, these ones should be in the shade and these should be in the sun. These ones need a lot of water and these don't. These ones, when you pick them, you better wear gloves because you're going to get cut, and these ones you don't. So there's a lot of benefit to having that kind of data. Now, if you brought some 5-year-old kid into the garden, he would perceive exactly what I perceive. But all he could say is, these are pretty and they smell nice. In other words, he's telling me what he perceives. He can't analyze that. He never heard the word hydrangea. He never heard the word iris. He doesn't know. So most adults are like that kid as regards humans. They don't know what they're looking at, which is why more than 50% of the marriage in the United States end in divorce. And more than 50% of the people in the United States aren't married in the first place. So there's obviously a big mess going on with it. So, but it's not just marriage. It's like, this is why you get people involved with them who do terrible things to them. Like Billy Joel is a perfect example. I don't know if you know this. He had his brother-in-law managing his finances. The brother-in-law stole $1 million from him. Okay? This is many decades ago. So he learned a lesson, see? Now, if he had had Septemics, he could have looked at this and analyzed this and seen, yeah, this is not somebody I want to put in charge. See? Now, let's go back to motivation, because let's say you own a car dealership and you need a new salesman. So you're interviewing this guy, and you can see from what he says that this is a money-motivated person. This guy wants money. Great. Hire him. That's what you want. You want that guy. He's going to get a percentage of what he sells, and he's going to be out there hammering tongs every day trying to sell your cars. That's what you want. So in that case, you want somebody who's money motivated. See, you might not want to marry somebody who's money motivated, but that's who you want selling your cars. So this is very specific and very individual. So there's no generality about this. Now, I have to tell you, I absolutely know that these 35 scales are correct. They're correct the way Newton's 3 laws of motion are correct. They're correct the way the laws of thermodynamics are correct. They're correct the way the Pythagorean theorem is correct. They're axiomatically correct, in the same way that the Fibonacci sequence is correct. So Fibonacci saw in nature certain numbers showing up. Like you could take the sunflower and you can count the seeds going one way and you get one number, and you count them the other way, you get another number. Well, those are what we call Fibonacci numbers. Why is that? Why isn't some random number? Or you take a pine cone, it's the same thing. You count it one way, you get one number. Count it the other way, you get another number. The Fibonacci numbers. So he looked at these numbers and he said, there's something going on here. There's a pattern to this. And he was able to, you might say, reverse engineer the formula out of these natural phenomena. And he gave it to us. So we now know what we call the Fibonacci sequence. So we know the Fibonacci numbers to infinity. So because he looked at this and had this mathematical insight, he was able to see there's a pattern here. And he was able to write it down and give it to us. And we all benefit from it. So it's not a surprise that when certain things have these Fibonacci numbers in them, there's no mystery about it. There's a formula for it. That is what this book is like. So I looked at these materials that just appeared in front of me, and I wrote them down. And the more I wrote them down, the more I saw there was a pattern here. So I didn't invent the scales. I just wrote down what I saw. The reason why I was able to find this before anyone else is, I had a career as a human development engineer. So you talk about an engineer working with people one-on-one for thousands of hours in a very perceptive and analytical way. I had to really perceive what was going on with the client in order to know the right question to ask. I had to really perceive the biofeedback I was using in order to get a correct analysis of what was happening with the person. So that enabled me to discover the data. But the other thing is that because I'm a polymath, I was able to bring all of my knowledge to bear on this. I'm an expert in about 24 different subjects. So because of that, I would look at it And I could bring my understanding of history, my understanding of psychology, my understanding of metaphysics, my understanding of science, my understanding of mathematics, my understanding of physics. All of that had some bearing, not only on how I work with my clients, but on figuring out what this was. There aren't too many polymaths around because the education system discourages it. If you look at the graduate schools, all of them are focused on specialization. So I have a friend who had a PhD in biochemistry. Very smart man. He knew a lot more about biochemistry than I knew. But on every other subject, I knew more than him. I had another friend who has a degree in math. He knows more math than I do, but on every other subject, I know more. And another guy had a graduate degree from MIT in engineering. He knows engineering better than I do, but I know everything else that he doesn't know. So that is the value of being a polymath, that you have a depth of understanding. Now, if you go back to the ancient philosophers, of course, that was a Greek word. They invented that word. It means love of wisdom. Aristotle and Plato and Pythagoras, they were called philosophers, but actually they were polymaths. So for those of you who don't know what a polymath is someone who is knowledgeable in multiple disparate subjects. And examples, historical examples, are Erasmus and Jefferson. So because of those two traits that I had, my career and my polymathy, I was able to figure this. And because my whole life has been about helping people, I was motivated to spend 25 years perfecting. So after 25 years, I had gotten a lot of feedback. I had rewritten the book a half a dozen times, and each time it got clearer and clearer and clearer, which was my intent, to make it clear so that the average reader of English would look at it and say, yeah, this makes sense. So let me tell you how to use this. Let's say you have a friend, right? Your friend Fred. And every time you see Fred, he complains to you about his wife. Andrew, I don't know what I'm going to do about my wife. She's driving me nuts. Really? What's going on? Well, now she's doing cocaine. She's fooling around with some guy. She yells at me. She doesn't clean the house. I don't know what I'm going to do. And you say to him, you get tired of listening to him. So you say, Fred, come here, let me show you this. Then you open up the book to the scale of relationships. And you put it in front of his face. And he'd look at it and he'll say, you mean there's a scale of relationships? You say, yeah. This relationship that you've been complaining about to me for 6 months, where is it on this scale? I absolutely guarantee you he's going to want to know that. Because this is like a new look at this. See? So he looks at it, and in a matter of seconds, he will find a bracket. He'll say something like, well, I can see right off levels 1, 2, and 3 have nothing to do with this relationship because that's the top of the scale, and this is a train wreck. So he's gotten it down to 4, 5, 6, or 7. See, that's progress. So then you say to him, go ahead and read the text, and then you get it exactly. So he reads the text, and you can help him as a tutor if you've read the book. And when then he comes back to it and says, well, now that I read it, I can see we're at level 5. No wonder this is a mess. That's near the bottom of the scale. That's not so good. See, because I tell you with specificity the exact content and nature of every level, what people at that level do. So he can see. See, he has an epiphany. That explains why. Yeah, well, I took it to Cancun and it didn't go well because, see? So now he understands. Oh, now I see what was going on. And then you say to him, you know, you could move this relationship up to level 4. He says, you can? You say, yeah, it tells you in the book how to do that. He says, well, I'm going to go do that. You say, wait a minute. Before you go, let me show you something else. And you show him the scale of sexuality. Well, that's obviously relevant. So he says, you mean there's a scale of sexuality? And you say, yeah, you don't have to tell me if you don't want, but for your own illumination, where are you on the scale? See, he is going to want to know that. So, same thing happens. He finds a bracket. He'll say something like, well, I can see right away 6 or 7 have nothing to do with us. And 1 or 2, I don't even understand those. Those are way over my head. Can't be that. So it's got to be 3, 4, 5. So then you say, okay, go ahead and read it, and then you can get it exactly. So he goes through the same process. He reads it. He comes back. Well, now that I read it, I can see I'm at level 4. Well, that's not too bad. It's not at the top, but it's okay. And what he might also say, and my girlfriend, Gertrude, she's at level 5. Now I see what's going on. These are conflicting levels. If you look at that scale, you see some of those levels are obviously patently conflicting. If this guy's at this level and this guy's at this level, can't happen. So he says, oh, no wonder we're having a lot of trouble. And you say, okay, let me show you something else. And you open up the book to the scale of allegiance. Anytime a relationship deteriorates, it's always because allegiance has deteriorated. Obviously, there was a point at which they promised to love, honor, and obey till death do us part. Well, they were enthused about it, right? They come home happy from the honeymoon. Well, obviously, there's been a deterioration, and it's always because of a drop in allegiance. So he said, I think she's fooling around with some guy. That is obviously a lowering of allegiance, right? Because she said she wasn't going to do that. So he goes through it, and he goes through the same process. He'll find a bracket. He'll find his level. He might be able to find her level, see? And then he'll say, okay, well, we've fallen down, so I'm going to move myself back up, and I'm going to try to get her to move back up too. Now, I could keep doing what I've been doing for the last 5 minutes for another hour, because when you have a romantic relationship, it's complicated. So there might be easily 12, 15, 18, 20 different scales that have a bearing on this, because you go into things like the scale of control. You see, control is always an issue in relationships. She's controlling him, he's controlling her. Where are they? See? Is it near the top or is it near the bottom? See? So by the time he analyzes this relationship through, let's say, 18 different scales, he has a whole different understanding of it. It's greatly clarified in his mind, because remember, every time you correctly spot a level, you have an insight. She's a level 5 on the scale of control. That's what's going on here. No wonder she does X, Y, and Z. See? So by the time he goes through all of this, he understands what the hell is going on in this relationship. It's no more a mystery. So that could go a couple of ways. He could say, you know what? I'm going to get this book. I'm going to talk to Gertrude and straighten all this out between us, because I'm going to have us move up to a higher level on all of these different scales. See? And he can do that. Just get the book to do it. Tells you how to do it in the book. But it might go the other way. He might say, you know what? I'm done with this woman. This is a waste of time. I'm hitting my head against a brick wall. I'm not going to do this anymore. We're done. And again, he's going to be unhappy about it. He's got to be relieved. I'm so glad I figured this out. I'm going to get somebody who's not a nut. See? So that's how this works.
That's wonderful knowledge, Jim. This is going to help my audience for sure, because a lot of us, we don't know how to problem solve, and we rely on either a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And now we basically taking the work from them and doing the internal work ourselves. So I'm thankful and grateful for you instilling this knowledge onto us.
Right. And let me tell you why most people, and I mean more than 90%, can't solve their problems. In 99% of the cases, it's that they don't know the gradient. I've worked as a physical trainer, right? So if a guy comes to me and says, Jim, I'm 75 pounds overweight. I can't figure this out. I've been trying for years. Will you train me? Okay, I'll train you. Now, I'm not going to give this guy a 100-pound barbell and say, lift this, or tell him to go out and run 5 miles. That's malpractice. I would say to him, okay, come here, let me see something. And I give him a 15-pound barbell. I say, let me see you curl this. All right? So he starts doing it. He says, oh, this is easy. I can do this all day. Okay, fine. Let's try 20. See, I'm looking for the gradient. So now he tries 20, says, oh, all right, I can do maybe 12, 13 of these. Say, good. I want you to do 12 on each arm, 3 sets every day, and at the end of the week, we'll talk. See, that's what a good trainer does. Now, every good coach, therapist, facilitator, teacher in the world understands that human development must be done on a gradient. You cannot make a couch potato into an Olympic athlete. There's a half a dozen levels in between, right? It has to be done on gradients. So I might say to this guy, okay, you think you could walk a mile every morning? And he's probably going to say, yeah, I think I could do that. So, okay, I want you to walk a mile every morning. And next week we'll talk and see how you do. So the next week I say to him, how did you do? And if he says to me, this is easy, I can do more than this, I say, great, let's try 2 miles then. If he says to me, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, I'd say, okay, just keep doing it for another. See, that is what I did with my clients for 40 years, finding the gradient and then moving them up to the next level up. Now, why is this relevant to what you said? Most people don't know the gradient. These 7 levels are the gradients for the corresponding areas. So, in any scale, if you're, let's say, hypothetically at level 4, if you make a serious attempt to move to level 3, you will get there because it's the next thing up. But if you're level 4 and you try to move to 1 or 2, you will fail. That is why crash diets and crash exercise programs don't work. Okay? Same thing with study. I'm going to crash cram on this course. The guy goofs off for the whole semester, and the night before the exam, he's trying to get, doesn't work like it. It has to be a gradient. So I'm giving you the gradients. So each one of these 35 scales is a map for success in the corresponding area. So taken together, this whole book gives you 35 maps for success in life. A guy has a situation, right? Everybody has these things. Not necessarily forever or all the time, but at some point. So he finds a corresponding area. In other words, he looks at the right scale. Like the guy was 75 pounds overweight. He looks at the scale of physical fitness. Okay, well, where am I on the scale of physical fitness? And if you study it, you'll be able to find, I can see I'm at level 5. That explains why I'm always tired. So the next level up from that is normal. He's not normal. If he were normal, he wouldn't be 75 pounds overweight. So you have to get him to not be tired. So this guy shows up 6 months later and I say, how are you doing? And he says, I'm not tired anymore. Well, that's yippee. He moved up to the next level. Now he's at normal, which is level 4. See? And I see this all the time in my clients. I had a client recently. I'm tired. And I don't want to rain on this parade, but I'm expecting this guy to get sick because sick is the next thing down from tired. If you're tired, sooner or later, you're going to get sick. You're not going to get sick if you're not tired because it's the next level. One of the actions of this subject is you can only go to the adjacent level. Now, sometimes there is an apparency that you skipped a level because you went through it quickly or easily, but you went through it nevertheless. So you have a guy, right? He's normal, right? And he starts saying, gee, I feel tired. Well, that night he comes down with a fever. See? And he winds up in bed with the flu. See, he went through that level. Now he's sick. So he gets the right medication. And when the doctor sees him, he says, how are you now? I says, well, I'm not sick anymore, but I'm kind of tired. See, he came up to the next level. That's the next level up. So then I would not be content with that. I would work with this guy. Okay, how much sleep are you getting? Is it good quality sleep? How much are you exercising? See, Are you working overtime? I would get the guy to resolve the fatigue. So, this client who was complaining to me for a long time about being tired got sick. No surprise. I was waiting for that shoe to drop. So the subtitle of this book is Analysis, Prediction, and Management of Human Affairs, because you use the scale to analyze. And once you analyze it, you can predict what's going to happen because you know the next level up and you know the next level down. So if a person's at a level, he's either going to go up or he's going to go down. So because you can predict, you can manage it. It's very easy to manage something when you can predict. So let's say you have a baseball manager, right? So he has some guy coming up, right? He's a left-handed batter. There's a left-handed pitcher. He says, this guy's batting average against lefties is 152. I'm putting in a pinch hitter because we got 2 runners on base. And he puts in a right-hand hitter. You see, he's predicting this guy's probably going to strike out because it's a left-handed pitcher. And there's a lot of left-handed hitters who can hit left-handed pitchers. It's not unusual. But most pitchers are right-handed, so for most of the time, it's not a problem. So you're in this situation where you need a hit. So you put in your best right-hand hitter who's on the bench. Analysis, prediction, management. So that is what this book facilitates. These skills are natural law, and because they're natural law, they make sense to people. None of this is counterintuitive. When you study the scales, when I say study the scales, I mean read the book. You have to read the text. I mean, the scale is in a table, so you'll get a lot of it just by looking at the table. But then when you read it, that's what he means. That's the manifestation. So let me tell you something that happens with this book. Guy's reading the book, right? He's not thinking about his mother-in-law at all. He's just reading the book. He gets down to level 5. He says, wait a minute. This is my mother-in-law. She's exactly like this. She does exactly what it says here. She's at this level. Now, his relationship with her just improved. Now, let me ask you something. I don't know this guy's mother-in-law. I probably don't even know the guy. Right? There are people all over the world reading this book. I never met them. I'm never going to meet them. I don't know their names. So why does this work like this? Because it's natural law. See? So if you have a right triangle and one side is 3 and the other side is 4, well, you know the hypotenuse is going to be 5. I don't even need to calculate it because it's the Pythagorean theorem. So that's the beauty of natural law. So this is what engineering is about. So this is human affairs through the mind of an engineer. So an engineer has to get it right. So you have all these engineers working for Apple come up with these products, right? Great products that work. That's lots of engineers, thousands of hours of expertise, okay? It's got to work because an engineer cannot say, oops, can't do that. A painter can do that. A dancer can do that. But an engineer has to get it right. You can't have the airplane fall out of the sky and say, oops, I didn't calculate that correctly. The struts needed to be 70% stronger. You have to get it right in advance. That's what I did with this. That's why I spent 25 years working on this, to get it right. So that anybody, including you, can get this book and say, my son's having trouble in school. You turn to the scale of scholarship. It tells you right there 7 levels of scholarship and how to make somebody a scholar. Right? So you say to your son, Jimmy, come over here. Let me show you this. He says, what? Look at this book. You show him the scale of scholarship. Well, let's say he's 13, so he can read this book, right? He knows he's a scholar, so he's interested right away. He says, you mean there's a scale of scholarship? Yeah, look at this. Where are you on this scale? Guaranteed he wants to know. You're not going to have to motivate him. He'll look at it and say, yeah. And he'll, in a matter of seconds, he'll find the brackets. Definitely not 1, 2, or 3. That's for the smart guys. I'm not one of those guys. Okay, let's have you read it, and then you get it exactly. See, he's only selecting from 4, which is a very easy task. Like the certain places you go to, like In-N-Out Burger. What do they have? Like 6 things on the menu. It's either a hamburger or a cheeseburger. or vanilla shake or chocolate or Coke. That's it, and they make a fortune. Okay, they have French fries. That's about it. That's what this is like. It's not like when you go to a Chinese restaurant and there's 200 things. So he's only selecting from 4. He knows the other 3 are not relevant to him. So he studies it, comes back and says, well, I can see I'm at level 5. That's not so great. No wonder I'm having a lot of trouble. That explains X, Y, and Z. And Dad says, in this case, it's you. That's the hypothetical. You say, Jimmy, let's have you move up to the next level. He says, you mean you can move up to the next level? Yes, and it tells you how to do it. So you work with him. You just follow the instructions in the book like a cookbook. It's just like a cook. You can have a guy, he's never made a cake before. He opens the page, half a teaspoon of sugar, 2 cups of flour, and he gets a cake. So that's what this is like. Now, you did that without hiring a tutor, without sending him to remedial classes, without invalidating him, without yelling at him, without making him feel stupid. It's just this is what it is. See, you don't tell him. You let him get it. Because this is not hard to get because it's natural law. It's like when something is natural, you get it. Like any idiot can figure out if he falls off the first rung of the ladder, he's probably going to be okay because it's only a foot high. But if he falls off the 4th rung of the ladder, he's probably going to get hurt because it's 4 feet off the ground. See, that's natural law. And a lot of this is what we call common sense. In this case, these scales are precise, and that is the benefit of them. In other words, every person is at some level on every scale. Well, you can choose to ignore that data if you want, but you do so at your own peril. It's much smarter to figure it out. Okay, where am I on the scale? Oh, I'm at level 4. Okay. See, he'll have an epiphany. That explains what. See? So, like, for example, the scale of basic purposes. When you find your basic purpose, it's a life-changing moment. That's what I'm about. See, and then you understand the people at the other 6 levels. That's not what you're about. You throw that out and you live at the level you're at. Now you can try to move yourself up to the next level, but just knowing what level you're at is very illuminating. Okay, that's who I am. You hear a lot of people saying, I don't know who I am, I'm searching for myself, stuff like this, identity crisis. This solves all of that stuff. You just go through a scale of attack. I'm at level 3. I see that explains this, and this. And then you can move yourself up to level 2. So that's what this is about.
Well, this has been a wonderful interview, Jim, and I'm thankful and grateful for you coming by, and my audience can sure use this knowledge and wisdom. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and take care now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.